It is a live Senior Bowl edition of the Sick Podcast with Andy McNamara. We're going to be heading down to Mobile, Alabama to talk from the field post-game with our guy, John Vogel, our draft expert here at the Sick Media Network. What Browns possible prospects showed up, and who might have hurt themselves. Let's get to the show.
Turn up your volume. Because you're about to listen to The Sick Podcast with Andy McNamara, the sickest Cleveland Browns podcast.
Chubb runs, he's to the 10, 15, he's to the 20, 25, 30, 35, 40, 45, 50. There goes Chubb, he's to the 30, 20, 10, 5, touchdown, Chubb Hub.
It's gonna be sick.
Welcome, everybody. Special Saturday edition of the show. And I thought, well, we've been having the Senior Bowl all week, all the practices. We had the game right now. We got our guy John Vogel in Mobile, Alabama at the game. So why not do a special show on Saturday? So that's what we're doing right now. Dive into some of those Browns prospects in this next step. Because next stop's the Combine, Pro Days. Before we know it, it'll be April, and the draft will be here. Make sure you're clicking notifications on, subscribe, share the link. Let's get the conversation going. You can jump in the chat too. Any draft or prospect questions you have, get them in. We can ask John, and we'll kick it around. Make sure you're following us on X, on Twitter, at SickPodBrowns, at AndyMC81, Instagram, at AndyMCSports. A few things before we bring John on that I noticed from the game. So you remember last week we got trending my say no for Milroe saying, for Jalen Milroe. I believe after this week of practices where he missed 8 consecutive ones, he made the odd throw barely. Did not really improve in my mind what I saw. And in the game, get this series. This is the series I saw, okay? Remember, his thing is speed, Jalen Milroe. So, first down, gets the ball, rolls out, gets tripped up, loss of 7. Next, dinks and dunks about a 3-yard pass. Okay. Throws another one, 5-yard pass. Still short. 4th down, they're going for it. Remember, his main attribute is speed. He rolls around the edge and he gets his ass caught and dragged down short of the first down marker. I was not impressed at all. Folks, this guy's Malik Willis. And he's supposed, I was going to say a faster Malik Willis. He got caught at the Senior Bowl. What's going to happen in the NFL? The guy's inaccurate. If you don't send him to a team and just park him, Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson, send him to one of those clubs and have him sit and maybe you allocate one guy to work with him to see if he can throw. He had jittery feet and all that. I guess. I don't think he's worth it. I think you have other guys you can draft. Riley Leonard threw better, and he's a glorified Taysom Hill. Let's get real, okay? Like, ridiculous. Some guys who did play well, my guy Ollie Gordon II, Oklahoma State Cowboy. I told you about him earlier in the week. I've been following this guy for 2 years. Ran, blasted through for a first down, then got tossed and threw a touchdown. Ollie Gordon can throw better than Jalen Milroe. You kidding me? Sensational. I want the Browns to get Ollie Gordon. He's getting comparisons to Kareem Hunt, prime Kareem Hunt. I'm in love. I want Ollie Gordon II. Jack Bech, another guy, won the MVP. Really interested in him. 6'2", 215, has a great story as well out of TCU. So a few guys to watch, but let's head down. The game has ended. The Senior Bowl is over. To John Vogel, our draft expert for the Sick Media Network. We go to Alabama. And John, there you go, buddy. How are you, my friend?
Great, Andy. How are you doing, man?
Doing well. You got the lanyard there, the sweet gear, and looking good. And I looked, the weather looked fantastic. How was the atmosphere there?
Weather down here has been beautiful, man. We had 3 really good days for practice. It stayed in the 70s most of the practices. Today it was probably close to, I think it was just a little over 70.
Oof.
Beautiful weather. Couldn't get any better for football. And, it's just funny because, Mobile just set records this past week of, the most snow they've ever seen in their history. They had about 6 inches, somewhere, depending on where you are, 6 to 8 inches. And it still turned around the weather. We got a beautiful week.
Wow. Well, I am very jealous from where I sit of that weather. That's that seems pretty sweet. Now, John,
Yeah.
I want to go back a little bit through the week of practices because that's where a lot of the time, and most of the time, the coaches and the staff, a lot of the teams leave for the actual game itself. But looking at the game itself, one, how much stock do you take in performances out of the game? Again, an all-star game. Guys haven't really played together except for that week. And who impressed you today?
There were a few, looking at my notes here that I've just been sitting here taking the entire time. Uh, you don't want to put that into the actual game. You don't want it to overwhelm what you've already seen on tape, right, throughout the rest of the year. So I think that's kind of the first thing that you don't want to over adjust, but you want to look at the traits, the pure traits that the players have, and see how you can kind of, maybe pick up on some different things that you didn't pick up on earlier in the season in tape. We get really good looks. They do a great job filming the practices so that we can kind of get field level looks and see little finer details. So you want that to kind of you really want that to cement what you've already seen.
Right.
A couple of guys I think that stood out to me. I thought, well, first off, we can't really talk about the Senior Bowl today without talking about Jack Bech. I mean, the TCU wide receiver, H-back type player. This is a huge week for him, not just for stocks purposes, but because this is the first time that he's playing football since his brother was killed tragically in that New Orleans terror attack back at the beginning of the month. Everyone this week wore number 7s for him. He wore number 7 at Princeton with the tiger stripes on the back of their helmets. He wore 7 for his brother this week. Comes up with 2 touchdown catches in this game, including the walk-off game winner, and showed physicality all week, being able to make those tough catches through contact. It looked like that he was probably playing a lot of that, that pain away, which is great to see from a guy to have an outlet for that. But he was fantastic today. And then I think on the defensive side, you want to talk about the pass rushers. I think that there was a lot in this game that you can kind of take away from, particularly one of the guys that I really liked all year leading up to this game was David Walker out of Central Arkansas. He's a little bit undersized, but he's a dude that really has a good plan put together when he goes into a pass, rep, and he can really disrupt the pocket. He's got long arms for his size, and he's vicious when he gets close to the quarterback. He had a couple sacks. I think the other guy that had a couple sacks in this game was Savion Jones. It was absolutely vicious, and he's out of LSU. More of a gap shooter, but a guy that can get up in there, almost unguardable one-on-one when he's playing what he's trying, when he's really, engaged and focused. There's some certain, games this year where you didn't see him play as strongly. But, he was fantastic, I thought.
Let's get back to Jack Bech for a second. You mentioned the story sensational. You got to like the size, 6'2", 215, was the MVP for the Senior Bowl. Obviously, his draft stock, I'm sure, was helped this week. Where do you see a player like this going? Like you said, could be a bit of a blend. It could be a wideout, a halfback slot, tough character guy. Where are you hearing and feeling he might go? Because I'll tell you, we're looking for the Browns can use a bit of everything. And I wouldn't mind a Jack Bech.
Yeah, I think when you get past the first 3 or 4 receivers in this class, it's wide open. And he's definitely made a statement this week, putting a lot of good stuff on tape. The one thing that you can kind of pick at his game a little bit with is he's not as crisp or clean as a route runner. So maybe some more refined offenses, people that want to run, more traditional type stuff isn't going to like that as much. But if you put him in the slot in a West Coast type system, and I think he's drawn a lot of comparisons this week to Puka Nacua. He kind of does have that skill set where he's not going to impress you with, the pure raw athletic ability, but he's a football player.
Right.
And Nacua obviously has been one of the most productive receivers in the NFL the last couple of years. So you take a guy like Bech, I think probably toward the end of day 2, beginning of day 3, but, need and maybe the lack of undefined talent, depending on how the combine rolls, could definitely push him into the second round, I think.
And you know what? The thing is with route running, and if you didn't run a lot or refined in college, like we can teach that. If you're a willing student, that can be learned, right? That can be learned. But you have the heart, the work ethic that this guy apparently has. That's really what we're looking for. Now, you mentioned a couple defenders, and the Browns could use defensive tackles, maybe another edge. But the defensive tackle side, were some of the guys you met, you said that some rushers. Was anybody a DT that you liked?
Oh, Darius Alexander, man, out of Toledo. He's had himself a very impressive week, the way that he carries himself. And I think the one thing that stood out to him, as opposed to what we had seen on tape with him previously, is he has a plan now when he's going into a rep, which is one of the most important things when you are attacking a specific player, is understand how to attack him and have a plan of doing it. So we've seen that this week. His hand usage really has improved. So that means that he's put a lot of work in the last couple months. He's definitely top all week, as one of the top guys, I would think, and definitely had a good game to back it up today.
In conversation with John Vogel down at the Senior Bowl, and we're on the Stadium Mustard hotline here with him, baby. And you know what, John, we're going to slap some mustard on some of these guys, okay? Because some of these players look delicious today for the Browns. Ballparks to backyards everywhere in between. Stadium Mustard, smooth but spicy mustard, rich in taste and tradition. Stadium Mustard, real and organic, not manufactured. You can get it at Huntington Bank Field in Cleveland, all over Ohio, maybe in Mobile, Alabama, I don't know, but all over America, Canada, wherever. Put it on your pork chops, your deli sandwiches, burgers, hot dogs. Stadium Mustard, it is sensational. Make sure you're getting it there. Before we get to the quarterback talks here, any on the running back end, I mentioned Ollie Gordon II off the top. This is a guy who I've been following for a couple years because I was in a fantasy college league a couple years ago that I had him. And that Oklahoma State team wasn't very good this year, so the numbers might be a bit down. But we saw a showcase where he can run, he can throw a gadget play. This guy can catch it. He's getting comparisons to Kareem Hunt throughout the week. And in this game, what have you made about Ollie Gordon II?
Yeah, I like the Kareem Hunt comparison. I think that fits in pretty well. Obviously, he had the spectacular throw today on the double pass for a touchdown. The first one to Jack Bech. I think the one thing that kind of helps him is he's played quarterback before. He came out of high school and he was a dual threat quarterback. So he definitely has an understanding of the game that is probably a little bit farther. It's more advanced than most running backs, right? So he was good. I think the guy I really like this week at the running back position would be Rashard Smith out of SMU. More of your gadget receiver. He actually played wide receiver for 3 years at the University of Miami. He just recently made the switch to running back this year, ran for 1,000 yards. He's a critical part of their offense going into the playoff. And ultimately, coming up as the runner-up in the ACC in their first year in that conference. Brashard, I really like the skill set that he's put out. He also had a decent game today with a few catches, a few runs, an explosive kick return. So he's going to bring some special teams value. That's a guy that I'm pretty excited about.
So during the week, the game, like we said, is one thing, but really during the week is where you hear about, okay, this guy's doing well, or footwork, or this and that. Give me, and we'll go through both, but give me your standout. Maybe it could be someone who surprised you or who stood out. We know Bech obviously was one of them, but who else during that week of practice that you were there seeing like, man, this guy's really got my attention now?
Yeah. I think Jackson Slater fits the bill. The guard out of Sacramento State. I liked him a lot, as a potential backup guard in the NFL. And I caught on to him, I think, before this season even started. There were several defensive linemen that played against him that I had spoken with that all said that he was by far the hardest guy that they ever had to go up against. And when you put on the tape, you saw that. I also didn't think he would be here at the Senior Bowl. I thought he would be more of a Shrine Bowl player. But he gets up here and he showed everybody he belonged. Very, very aggressive mentality. Attacks, straight off the line of scrimmage, even as a pass protector. He's very good at disrupting guys off their first step. He's a guy I think that's really proven that he belonged. And including showed even, a believer like me, a guy that thought that he could play in the league. I think he showed me that he's a lot farther along than even I had projected.
Interesting. And obviously we have risers, but John, we got fallers as well. Who hurt their stock the most? And look, this is one step in the draft prospect. Doesn't mean the player's terrible. Could just have a bad week, or could also be a little eye-opening to scouts and teams of, hey, at least we maybe know where he's fitting on the road to the combine. But who hurt themselves draft-wise?
Probably Tommy Hill, corner out of Nebraska.
Hmm.
He was a relatively early invite in the process, and I was a little bit surprised to see him on his way here, but he had a very tough week, really struggled in coverage and especially in one-on-ones. Didn't show too. I think that he probably hurt himself more than anybody here.
Interesting. Okay. And John, let's move to the quarterbacks in conversation with John Vogel on
Mhm.
X at Draft Vogel, Instagram at NFL Draft Vogel, covers all things leading up to the draft, prospects, and all that good stuff for the Sick Media Network. Let's talk QBs, man. And
Mhm.
going in, it was Jalen Milroe was one, Jackson Dart was another. You had Riley Leonard for Notre Dame. The Seth Hennigan guy was popping up. There was a Canadian at a Laurier University. Big picture, and then we'll dive in a little bit. Big picture, the quarterbacks. How did you feel?
Oh, the first day of practice was hard.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a lot of guys just coming in trying to adjust, which you usually have a rough first day of practice. But I think we saw just a little bit of an uptick the next couple of days. Dylan Gabriel was here as well from Oregon,
Yes, right.
and Tyler Shuck out of Louisville. Um, I think overall, it's such a weak quarterback class that it's very difficult to find, a guy that you felt really good about potentially being a long-term starter in the league in
Right.
this game this week. But there's definitely some developmental options there for a couple of them, and then I think you can see the upside in a guy like Jalen Milroe or a guy like Jackson Dart or a guy like Tyler Elkersma. I might be
Mm-hmm.
slaughtering his name. I'm sorry.
I got it up here
From
because I forgot
Canada.
it. I have it here
I
because I
think it's
forgot his name too. Taylor
Taylor Elgersma.
Elgersma. Did you see
You
him at
could
all?
see.
I didn't see much of
Mhm.
him. He's got the size. Won the Canadian version of the Heisman.
Yeah.
How did he look? Look. I'm in Canada. I never heard of him before this. So like, how did he look? How did he hang with this elevated level of competition?
You could see how far behind he is. I
Mm,
think that a lot of people, I know you understand the differences between Canadian football and American football, but you know, Canadian football, it's a different field. You got 10 extra yards on the
yeah.
field, the 55 is the midfield. You got 20 yards in the end zones, and you got 12 on 12 as opposed to 11 on 11. And then you've got a lot of running options, running routes. The receivers getting a start off the line of scrimmage,
Yeah. Only
so
three downs
that'll
too.
three downs, that
Yeah.
too. So I think that impacts your timing a little bit. Especially when you're throwing to guys that you've never thrown before, you know, not having those running starts, not having those guys, 5 yards down the field as you're hitting, your third, second or third step in your drop. Um, so I think that there were some adjustments that were very clear early on that he was struggling with.
Mm,
But overall, he came out here. He made a couple pretty good throws. He was absolutely harassed the second half and stood in there and kept fighting. I think that those are all good traits. But you can see the pro arm. He has a cannon. Throws the ball very well. And he's got some mechanical stuff he needs to clean up with his feet, particularly his footwork. He just there's a lot of bad habits there that weren't
mm.
corrected. And then some people will take issue with his throwing form. It's quite low when the ball comes out. Um, but overall, you can see that he definitely has the upside. He might, if I was, advising him, I might tell him it's not a bad idea to do a couple years or a year in the CFL and just develop and get some more exposure, more
Right.
experience, to reps and at a higher level just to help you develop. But you can see that he could potentially make a practice squad and serve as a developmental three this year.
Sure. And again, if you go to a place, it's like John, it's so much about landing spot, right? Like we see that. And you can look at examples where Sam Darnold was ruined in New York. And look, eventually elevated himself here. Geno Smith, another example. Like the landing spot is so important. So if you have a spot where you have let's use the Kyle Shanahan, for example, but whoever, you got a good quarterback coach for
Mhm.
Eldersma who sits there and can grow. If you have those intangibles, that can really be an asset. But yeah, he's not going to be a guy you're going to be counting on to start week one or anything like that.
Yeah, he's not going to come out and win you 12 games next year. That's not
No,
going
no. No. So if we're looking at this from a Browns perspective, I like the raw capability, but I got DTR as an extra. I don't need Elgersma here. So let's look at the other guys. The top two, I guess, ranking wise, would have been Jalen Milroe and Jackson Dart. For my eyes, I thought both were underwhelming. And if anything, John, you said like we've seen in past years, we've seen Dak Prescott, we've seen Josh Allen, guys showcase themselves. If anything, this maybe gave me more questions and hesitation on both those other sort of next level guys. What about you?
Hmm. Yeah, I thought the Dart started slow all
Mm-hmm.
week. And he kind of settled in a little bit better, but there were still issues. Now, as soon as he stepped into this game today, the team was better. So I think that that's a note that you take away as
Okay.
okay, there's some leadership, there's some intangibles there. The second thing I think with him this week is he was really running a different read progression system really for the first time in several years.
Hmm.
The read progression system that Lane Kiffin runs is not a typical uh, read that you really run into anywhere else. That's one of the things I think that hurts his projection because I have to project how he's going to see how he's going to read defenses, how he's going to what's his understanding of the concept that we're running. So those were things that I think stood out, and you saw kind of rear its ugly head this week. But and then you mentioned Milrow, and this is one of the worst settings I think for Milrow because if you're going to make him, any level of successful at the next level, you're not going to put him in a 11 personnel offense like they were running out here a lot of the time, putting him under center all the time and doing all these different things. You're going to have him in a lot of power situations. You're going to have
Right.
him, in a Todd Monken, Lamar Jackson kind of system, and there wasn't really anything that they were running out here that you would run in that system. So it
Right.
was a tough ask for him, to come into this game and run an offense that he's never going to be asked to run again, hopefully. Um, I think that was really what kind of hurt him on that prospect side. So it just really reinforced the idea of he's not your traditional quarterback. You can't ask him to be Michael Penix Jr. or anybody close to
Mm.
that. You have to create and cater an offense to him, and that's going to have to be a decision that a coach or a organization as a whole will have to make and sell in on 100%.
Right. And be patient and ultimately decide, is he worth it?
Mhm.
Any of the other quarterbacks, did any raise their stock? Essentially, was there anybody that you think, John, that, hey, you know what? This guy could be a potential starter rather than what we see quite often is like, hey, he'd be okay backup. Is there anybody like Shuck or anybody who are like, Hennigan who did enough during the week that they it piqued your interest to maybe become a starter down the road?
I think guys at the most, the rest of this class will start 5 to 10 games over their careers as long-term backup guys.
Wow.
Be put into situations where somebody gets hurt and you have to hold the fort down for a few games. I really think
Right.
that's it. And you look at a guy like Shuck, and that's a really tough spot for him to be at because he's been playing football for so long. He just got done playing 7 years of college football.
Wow.
He had extra eligibility left too because of all the medical waivers. So he's going to have to answer those questions, when they go to the combine and do the medical evals on if he can hold up.
Hmm.
But he's also 25 years old. Um, there's not a lot of time left in his career to truly develop him. So it's hard to see him starting a lot of games.
Right.
Hennigan had a really good day today. He had a couple good days of practice once they settled in. But again, that's a guy where it's like maybe, a low tier backup quarterback, a developmental 3, a guy that kind of sticks around for several years, doing the dirty work, smart in the film room, and he's young, so he
Right.
has time to get that out. He played 4 years, so he's the total opposite, of Shuck, and you say he has that opportunity to develop because he's younger. That a Dylan Gabriel is not going to get, a Shuck is not going to get.
Right. So does that put, after this week, John, does that make you feel that teams who need a quarterback, has that raised, without them having to do a thing, has that raised the draft value of Cam Ward and Shedeur Sanders?
Yes and no. Um, it's tough to say because how are these teams going to answer the quarterback position in free agency? That's the first
True,
question,
true.
right?
Yeah, yeah.
There's not a lot of options in free agency, but there are some options. Darnold is potentially a free
Mm-hmm.
agent. Mac Jones should be a free agent.
Mm-hmm.
That's a guy that started some games.
Yeah.
Um, it's not a great group of guys that are going to be available, but there are options. So how do they feel about their quarterback situations, in the free agent class? And then after that, how do they feel about the draft? And
Right.
I think that the league really acknowledges that this isn't a great class. Um, I don't know if it necessarily, it boosted these guys in their stock, but I think that there could be enough of a panic and a necessity to bring in a guy that you could see those guys come off the board a little bit earlier than they probably should.
Right. And maybe it's a case where, if we don't get who we want in free agency and we don't like this other class, this tier underneath, we got to go get our guy. That could open up. Trade opportunities could be really interesting. One more for you. The tight end, Arroyo, was that the?
Yeah. Elijah Arroyo. Yep.
Elijah, this guy popped, and he was on my radar coming into this as far as because the Browns are going to need at least 2 tight ends. You got Njoku going back to the Stefanski system, the run heavy, the wide zone. He needed at least 3 tight ends. We got Njoku, and that's it. So he looks like he's moved himself up into a first-round pick. Is that fair?
It's going to depend on his medicals.
Okay.
He's another guy. He missed his first 2 years. He played very limited time due to injury. And this year was the first year that he was able to play over 10 games. So the medicals are going to be very important for him. He's also very young, so that helps him a little bit too.
Right.
But as long as everything comes up clean in his knee, he could. I don't know about if he'll get into the first round because you've got, Tyler Warren is an option. Colston Loveland is an option out of Michigan. You've got a few options there at that position, but I would be shocked if the medicals are clear and he comes off the board after the 60th pick.
Right. Mason Taylor in there. It's a nice draft class for tight ends, some value later on as well. John, fantastic job here. Thank you so much for breaking this down live at the Senior Bowl. The game is over in Mobile, Alabama. Tell people where they can find all your great work on the Sick Media Network, because, man, this is your time, right? We're leading up to combines next and then the draft. So tell people where they can find you.
Yeah, you can get me on the Sick Podcast of Draft Vogel on this network. And then you can find me on X at Draft Vogel. That's really where everything gets posted, every update that you could possibly find. And any shows, anything that we're doing, I'm sure we'll have something we'll be doing with Adam Rank, with the Chicago Bears, Titans guys like we did last year, and the Colts guys and all them. I know we got a couple other shows loaded up as well with the Raiders and I think the Rams now too. So it's going to be a busy off season, but this is draft season. We're excited, man. Let's get it going.
It's going to be fantastic. Thank you so much, my friend. We'll talk to you soon. Safe travels back.
Absolutely. Thank you, Andy.
There he goes, John Vogel at Draft Vogel on X, live from the Senior Bowl, folks. How about that? Breaking it down and looking, and I'm just so happy that the Browns now have a first-round pick again, because now we can get excited about the draft. We can wash away that stink of a year, right? And get excited for it. The tight end options, folks, I'm telling you, I've been looking through some of these players. You got another guy, Ferguson, you can take later, Taylor. Now, their dynamic ability to be true playmakers goes down as the rounds fall, but there's going to be some options. Like I said, the Browns are going to need 2 more, at least, right? A rookie and probably a vet, maybe another rookie. Who knows? So there is definitely a need for tight ends here. Also, Bubba Vetrone, I don't know if you guys were watching the Senior Bowl. Bubba, for the first time this year, had a kick return back. Not for a touchdown, but an impressive kick return. I was like, there you go, Bubba. It can be done. It is possible. So maybe Bubba can take some of whatever. The guy's name was a number 0. I didn't catch his name, but zippy little returner. So hopefully, You had Kevin Stefanski down this week, first time he'd ever been at the Senior Bowl. Hopefully, the Browns took notes. Bubba comes back. Maybe it's that guy. Say, hey, give me him late round or undrafted guy, whatever, as a kick returner. Because Lord knows we need that big time. I came out of this Senior Bowl week, and the quarterback class specifically, being underwhelmed. There was no riser like we've seen in past years. I mentioned some, Dak Prescott, Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts, guys who came in at a lower grade and raised their stock to a level where you thought that could be a guy. I didn't see that. Jackson Dart looked very ordinary. Looked like a nice career backup. Jalen Milroe, to me, I don't want him in the 7th round for the Browns. I don't want Jalen Milroe at all. Say no for Milroe. Get that in your head, Berea. Not interested. I don't see how you could watch anything from this Senior Bowl combined with the lack of accuracy in college and think, oh, yeah, that's our guy. He didn't even look that fast. Watch the game. He didn't even look that fast. I was not wowed with blazing Lamar Jackson rookie speed. Not at all. And he's shorter than Anthony Richardson. So you can't even say he's like a bulldozer is going to run through people. He's stocky. 6'1", 225. Okay. No way. Riley Leonard, Taysom Hill. Turn him into a tight end who can have gadget stuff. Dylan Gabriel's too small. Again, career backup. This court, guys, I'm getting nervous. And this puts even more pressure on this front office to get it right. And even more of an emphasis from my thinking that on my green sticky note come draft day from the draft day movie, I'm writing for my quarterback choice, Will Howard, no matter what. I don't care where you get him. Get him. If you decide Cam Ward is not your guy, if he's even available at 2, or Shedeur Sanders, it's got to be Will Howard. That's it. That's it. Those are the only 3 I'm interested in. And to be honest, I'd rather Will Howard over Shedeur Sanders. But I wouldn't be upset with, you take Shedeur, you do your homework, you like Shedeur Sanders. I can live with it. I think he'll be good. Cam Ward, I get the Jameis Winston vibes off him with the bit of a wild man, gunslinger type, but he's got the tools. I'm not going to be upset. But you got to nail, and John mentioned it, who you getting in this free agent class, and the Browns better strike quick. Whether it's a released eventually Kirk Cousins, and you get him on that $1 million Russell Wilson type deal that the Steelers did, there'll be competition for him though. Whether it's him, if the medicals are clear, and he's recovered from and has his mobility back, whether it's Joe Flacco, maybe an Andy Dalton. Look, Andy Dalton was on a garbage Carolina team, and that offense immediately picked up. As a one-year guy, Andy Dalton, who knows the division, you could do worse. But the bottom line is this. You got to get your veteran who you can rely on, and not Justin Fields, for God's sake, please. Come on. Give me a guy who actually has done it and can do it and can be serviceable. Get your rookie, preferably Will Howard in my mind. Keep them on the bench as long as possible. Not Jacoby Brissett. Jacoby, great guy. We know who he is. And then some. Okay? No. Jameis, entertaining, not the guy. We know that. Get me Will Howard. That is I think the guys who didn't play in the Senior Bowl, their stock is raised more than the guys who did. That hurt everybody. Next step is the combine at the end of the month. We're going to see some fallout here. So my takeaways, folks, get me Ollie Gordon II. I wanted him before. I want him more now. 3rd round, trade back into the end of the 3rd round, 4th round. I don't think he'll make it to the 4th round now. That was sort of his grade before. I don't think he makes it there. I get Ollie Gordon II in the 3rd round. Get me Will Howard in the 3rd round if you can as well. If you trade down, get me, Mason Graham, defensive tackle. There are some good defensive tackles where if you don't get Mason Graham at the top, you can swing back in the 2nd. And there'll be a few options there that I like also. So this is all the gamesmanship, right? Very, very exciting stuff. So there you go, folks. Post Senior Bowl. Next step is the combine. And then it gets really real because free agency's after that. And then, of course, the draft at the end of April. So thank you so much to my guest, John Vogel, at Draft Vogel, live from Mobile, Alabama at the Senior Bowl, for jumping in, filling us in on the game action and the week of practices. To producer Shane and to all of you, we're getting closer to the draft, folks. The Senior Bowl's over. Combine's up next. We'll see you on Tuesday. And as always, go Browns!
And that's a wrap. Hope you don't miss us too much until next time. Follow the Sick Podcast with Andy McNamara on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, Google Play, and Apple Podcasts.